When you're lost in the darkness, look for the light. Welcome back, everybody, to this week's episode of the ClickerCast, your weekly show where we round up all of the ClickerCast, Bloatercast, Runnercast. What's the other one called, Richie?
Oh, there's the Rat King cast.
The Rat King. Oh, spoilers for the Rat King cast. Of course, you're here.
Shimmer cast.
You're here as we round up every week The Last of Us in review. We break down characters, storyline, plot, details you might have missed, Easter eggs, and how it compares to the good old masterpiece that is The Last of Us video game from Naughty Dog. You're joining myself, Chris, alongside my wonderful co-host, my fellow clicker, Mr. Richie. Welcome back.
I hope I'm not a clicker.
Oh, you're far away. We'll just hang fire. We'll talk about all the blows today. Shout out to all the wonderful folks who've joined us live, because we do this show live, usually every Tuesday. Of course, a little bit different this week. We're here on a Sunday evening, 8 p.m. as always. Good evening to Sedna, Jin, Don, and all the other wonderful folks who've joined us in the chat. All said people, Helix Heroes as well, I believe. So shout out to you wonderful folks who support the channel that extra bit more. We're here, Richie, to talk about episode 5 this week, Endure and Survive, with a runtime of 58 minutes. This is a nice tidy episode, only running at just short of the 1 hour mark. And of course, before we get into it all, we ask you lovely people watching along at home to click like, subscribe, and ring that bell, ring a ding ding, so you're kept in the loop with all of the great content we do here, like our weekly PlayStation podcast, Talking the PS, goes live every Tuesday. We've also got our weekly Xbox podcast, XPass, that goes live every Monday, and we also do a wonderful live stream every Thursday, with occasionally some first looks sprinkled throughout. Just like this past week, we went and played Halo for the first time ever, and more importantly, I dove into Hogwarts Legacy, because it's all the rage right now. We'll break all that down on this week's episode of Talking the PS. But if you are a Helix hero, you can get it right now live. However, Richie, we're not here to talk about PlayStation and video games. We're here to talk about video game adaptations. And on this,
we kind of are.
We kind of are. This Sunday evening, let's talk about it. Endure and Survive, the 5th episode in the, let's face it, fantastic debut season of television. This is a wonderful show. I'm having the time of my life.
This is fantastic, this show so far.
Every week, I'm waiting for that drop-off, and we were pre-warned by journalists who got to see the entire season that this is a stellar piece of television. And every week, the ratings come out, the viewerships go up, and we think, when's it going to drop off? And I know we've had, I think last week was maybe a lot of people's, weaker episode. I think it was our weakest of the lot. But you know what? It still holds that mark very highly.
We caveated that with, it felt like a setup.
Which it did.
That we expected this episode to have the payoff. That's why it felt weaker, because it felt we haven't finished that part of the story yet.
I think you're absolutely right. So, of course, here on the show, we talk about The Last of Us. We make comparisons to the video game. It's usually quite spoiler heavy because we've both finished and platinumed the video game, and we like to get into the nitty gritty of what they've done differently and such. So if you've not played the video games, we would always encourage you to go and enjoy them in their entirety before returning to the ClickerCast. However, Richie, before we get into the full breakdown of the episode, we go beat for beat, kind of line for line, chapter by chapter. What were your overall views of episode 5?
I think this is a phenomenal episode. It's a lot more action heavy than some of the previous ones, which is a bit of a nice change of pace.
Certainly.
Because we haven't actually had that much in the way of action, actually, throughout the show, let's be fair.
No, they've been quite reserved. We've had a lot of violence, but not, as you would call it, action. And I think you've referenced a few times that Joel isn't a superhero. It's not the video game where you go around killing 20 clickers one day, murdering 50 humans the next, and scavenging all your goods. It's a TV show, so it has to be grounded, pun intended, a little bit, into the world of reality.
Well, yeah, Joel, he's an old man. He's like
56.
Not old. Yeah, he's 56, and him taking on hundreds and hundreds of trained Fedra soldiers or fighting waves and waves of clickers just wouldn't land very well on a TV show, I don't think.
It would start to get far-fetched quite quickly.
But the way they've done the action in this episode, it makes sense. It's kind of believable as so far as within the law of the show, and I think it's just done everything they've done so far has just been fantastic.
Absolutely. I would completely echo that. I think it's another fantastic episode of television. It's a fantastic seasonal addition to The Last of Us, episode 5, of course. So we're past the halfway point now, officially. Yeah. And I was very happy to see the payoff of last week's setup. And it always felt like it was going to be a 1-2 punch of a story arc of a lot of these characters. And it certainly was. And I've got a good idea of who we might be giving our Performance of the Week award to. I think we might be back to traditional rules here on the ClickerCast for nominations. But we'll get into all that at the end of the show, of course. Overarching themes, I like this one, as you said, for a bit more action, but I do feel like we progressed a little bit, or if it not, I think quite a lot with the relationship between Joel and Ellie. There's quite a lot of things that happen in this week's show that really cements how they've grown as kind of a father and daughter relationship. And I'm excited to kind of see, with the aftermath of this episode, how it's really going to kind of elevate as we head into the final parts of the season.
Yeah, it feels like, in a weird way, as much as last week felt like a setup, we saw more development in Joel and Ellie last episode than this one. But now, the aftermath of this one sets up again for that next step in their relationship to develop again. So, although last week felt like a setup, for the action of this episode, the action of this episode feels like a setup for the character development that will happen in the next episode, probably.
Absolutely, I think it's really going for it, and of course at the end of the show we'll look ahead to next week's show, which is going to feel like a long time ago because of course we got this episode a little bit earlier. The Super Bowl is on, or was on, we should say, in the United States. So this episode was actually brought forward to Saturday here in the UK, Friday in the US, and elsewhere in the world. So it's actually going to be the longest wait until next week's episode, and I'm curious to see how that resonates with us having to wait those extra couple of days. Hopefully not too bad, but I do think this 2-episode arc ending in episode 5 had quite a nice kind of catchment point where we continue our adventure onto something new, as does happen in the video game. We shift seasons. For those who haven't played the video game, the Naughty Dog, the developers, kind of like to stop, like they chapter the game almost by season, so you get spring, winter, autumn and stuff. So kind of a similar thing with the way the show ends each week on an episode. So without further delay, Richie, shall we get into the breakdown of the show?
Let's do it.
Before we do, shout out to Jem and all the other couple of people who have joined us in the chat since then. Thank you. Don't forget to give the video a like. And I guess before we get into the full breakdown, I should apologise for the audio last week. We had a couple of troubles across all of our shows, but specifically, if you watched episode 4 of the ClickerCast back, my microphone was rigged to the wrong microphone. So every time I tapped my little piece here, mute myself as I coughed, because I'm still suffering from a chest infection. Not that type of infection, don't worry. I'm not going to turn into anything and come and get you.
He's already turned. That's why we lock him in that room.
I do think about 20 times or more last week I coughed, and upon watching the video back, I clearly mute the microphone and you can still hear me coughing my chest up, so I apologise retrospectively. But we're here for a breakdown of episode 5, Richie. We did endure and survive through that last week, and I'm here to break it all down this week. So we cue open, not a cold open. We got our traditional Last of Us, doom, 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 Gustavo Santaolalla, giving us that fantastic rendition, introducing us, and then we start off. Rebels have taken back the Kansas quarantine zone from Fedra. They're screaming freedom, fuck Fedra. There's absolute brutal execution going on the streets, and I'm talking brutal. You're looking at hangings, shotguns to the face of people tied up, and it's basically, I think what we anticipated from last week's episode, that the QZ zone fell mere days, weeks ago, and the rebels that we interacted with Kathleen and Perry and such was the fallout.
It was kind of hard to pin last episode how long it has been since Fedra fell in Kansas City, but now we know it's basically less than 2 weeks.
Yeah, it was 10 days, I think, give or take.
Yeah.
Which is crazy, because in the video game you kind of arrive and the whole place has collapsed, and there's groups of, for lack of a better term, assholes hanging about who are looking to kill and maim anyone who passes through, and that's where the ambush happens in the video game. But this time around, it's very fresh. Everyone's obviously hyped up and angry still, and this opening scene is just showcasing like how much they hated Fedra. There is no restraint here. It's straight up torture and cold-blooded murder to a lot of these people.
This is clearly the night it starts, like it happened. This is the day that it fell, when we we go straight into that. It's just happened. They're still rounding up Fedra soldiers, rounding people up, executing them for their crimes. No trials or anything, just literally lynching people, shooting people. There's one body just getting dragged behind a car, and it's just about 20, 30 knives in it. Yeah,
that's they say, I think in kind of homicide, it's a murder of passion, because it's not, you haven't just killed them, you've continued to go to town essentially on their body. And you mentioned it there, but there's a truck there's trucks going around shouting Kansas is free, freedom, and everyone's clearly elated. There's fire everywhere, there's explosions going off, screams, shouts, everything like that as the panic ensues. And we see Sam and Henry, who of course we were introduced at the end of last week's episode. They kind of stood up Joel and Ellie. They woke Joel up, and they've got a gun in their face, and we'll get to that in a moment. But we find Sam and Henry, they're in the streets, and this is kind of where we knew from the trailers, but we learn in the actual show that Sam is deaf, and they're using ASL, American Sign Language, to communicate. And we see Henry tell them basically, we need to get through it, and we need to find where we're going to hide. As the truck goes past shouting, collaborators, surrender now if you want a fair trial, as there's a body dragged behind said truck that we mentioned. And you just wonder, if you've collaborated in any way, you are better off running.
No fair trial.
No, you are better off running, and we'll see that in just a short moment.
Throughout the course episode, makes it very clear that if you're a collaborator or Fedra, she's got no time for you. You just don't.
Absolutely. So we meet Sam and Henry, and they kind of sneak off into the darkness and find somewhere to hold up into, and we then cut to Kathleen and Perry, who we mentioned. We find them in a prison cell. They go into probably one of the cells we've seen in the previous episode. And she addresses the group of people, the prisoners who have been captured there. And I think she addresses them as collaborators or informers, maybe. And they're all scared. They're clearly, some of them have been beaten up. They're bleeding. They look very weary. She has armed guards all around them. And she essentially goes in and says, come on, tell me, where is Henry? She wants to know who Henry is. And as she addresses them, she recounts stories of them betraying their friends, tells them you're all guilty, and it's kind of she's there to address them, but she's there for one thing, and that's the information about Henry.
She's she truly sees these people as kind of subhuman almost. She's basically referring to them as rats. It's almost kind of like Nazi propaganda kind of stuff. It's like she's like, I'm not Fedra, no one has to die. We can put you on trial. It's like, you're guilty, so we know what's gonna happen there.
Yeah, there's an odd character trait with Kathleen, which I wasn't too keen on in last week's episode, but seeing her interact with like a bigger group of prisoners so politely and calmly, like as you said, when she says like, oh, we can put you on trial. You're all guilty, so we'll know how that goes. And you just kind of like, how can she be so calm and polite in this situation? She's essentially just threaten them all with pain of trial, and then you will lose that trial. So it's not fair in the slightest. But she wants to know, Richie, where Henry is. She's still got this vendetta against Henry, and I think our thought process from last week was reaffirmed this week in what we find out about her brother and the relationship with Henry. But essentially, she wants to know where they are. She essentially threatens them all with death. She leaves and just says, kill them all. And that's when one of the guys speaks up, which you would if you had information. Like at the end of the day, if you're about to be killed, like unless you had any like real affiliation with Henry, then why not? If you're going to save your own skin. He says, yeah, he's with the doctor. I think we presume it's the doctor. He does name someone, but it's never really clear if it's the doctor or not. I just presumed it was. Who we saw last episode was captured. As they leave, Perry questions her. Like, basically, like, should we be hunting for Henry right now? As he did in last week's episode, like, is this really our priority? Like, he needs guards posters on... Remember, they've just overthrown a quarantine zone. And we know from last week how panicked he was about people returning to take back control. What they'd actually initially...
Like, Perry's focus is kind of on, okay, we've just took this place. Our guys are still in the street partying and rioting, so we need to get this contained, get this locked down. Who cares about Henry? He's one guy.
Yeah, he's essentially a head of security.
One guy. And Perry, who probably knows Henry, probably goes, he sold us out for the sake of his brother.
Mm-hmm.
Like, just
confirmed.
Let him go. Just kind of almost is that kind of just let it go. We can just move on behind him.
Yeah.
His focus was taking down Fedra, not one guy.
Yeah.
Kathleen, however, is fixated.
Oh, she gives a really sarcastic response, doesn't she? Where she's like, "Oh, should we give him an hour, a week? What about a month? Like, should we just let him get away with it?" He's not my seventh priority, Perry. And Perry's kind of like, "All right, yeah, I'm with you.
It's priority number one is.
Which it just shows you either how much her brother meant to her, or how far off the deep end she's already gone and there's no going back. But she does it in such a polite manner. I think it is genuinely both. Like, I've got the impression that she was on the edge of going off the deep end, and her brother's the one thing that seemed to ground her a bit. Mm-hmm.
She's lost that, and everything. I mean, we'll get into it a bit later, but everything he seems to have stood for, she saw that fail, and she's like, "Well, I'm doing it my way."
Yeah, and she definitely commits to doing it her way when Perry asks, "Are we really going to take them to a trial?" And she's like, "No. Kill them, like, basically burn the bodies, it's quicker." Like, so nonchalant, like, murder the 20 people in the cell.
They're not human to her anymore.
Yeah.
They're not. She doesn't view them as people. She's got no compassion for them.
Absolutely.
Like, if either they give her what they want, or we just get rid of them. We just dispose of them. They're trash.
Yeah. Do you feel like in another world, maybe if this season was like a 20-episode Walking Dead season, we would have seen an episode of maybe more of what Fedra did in the past? Like, because Henry references them later on how bad the Kansas... Even Joel says how bad the Kansas quarantine zone was, and he'd heard rumours. Do you think like a whole episode showcasing that?
You could easily do it if you wanted to. You could do it as like a spin-off series and go, you know what, it's going to be maybe 5 to 10 episodes. We're just going to focus on this group of people. And you can get like Kathleen and Perry back as like kind of the leads for that show.
Yeah, obviously we don't
see how Kathleen's like. You could do that. You can just see over the course of the season how Kathleen goes from probably quite sweet, innocent young woman to what we know her as now.
Exactly, yeah, and it's just that cold hard man. I don't want them to do a spin-off yet. I think we'll find out how well the show kind of runs and seasonally finishes out. But it's just there's so many stories and threads that I'd loved them to pull on, and there's bits later on that are included in the video game which could have been their own spin-off episode. I think we joked last week about Ish having his own episode, and we'll dig deeper into that as well. But yeah, Jem saying in the chat as well, yeah, she's really great, and I think Kathleen this week for me in particular, she really started to grow on me a little bit, because I had not concerns last week, but I struggled a little bit to believe she would be in charge. But the more we spend time with her, you kind of start to realise that she has her reasons for it, and she's kind of so far into it, and everyone clearly buys into her regardless of what she does. This is what makes this rebel group kind of scary in a way. Like, obviously they've got guns and weapons and stuff, but she is the leader.
She's the one who gives them direction. She's the one who gives the orders. She's not necessarily good at doing stuff herself, but she is going, right, if we do these things, this is the plan, this is what we're going to do. And it seems like every time she's done that, it's been successful.
Yeah, she's crazy enough to make those hard decisions where some other people might think, maybe it's not a good choice. She's like, nope, we're doing that. So they fan out, of course, find Sam and Henry. We flip back to Sam and Henry, and we see that they have met up with the doctor from last episode who got shot in the head by Kathleen. And he basically, he's dishing out some food. He shows them the attic that we saw emptied last week with the empty cans of food. He explains to Henry that, like, Sam's scared because you're scared and he looks up to you, kind of thing. Of course, Sam can't hear any of this. He's just sat in the corner scribbling away on his drawing pad. Henry comforts Sam. And I do love this moment where it's, again, kind of a brother just comforting a younger brother, a sibling. And he's, like, they're making the eye contact, and he asks him, like, are you okay? And again, they just sign so compassionately with each other. There's something really finely deft about this, and I guess this is where we should probably bring up, Richie, as well, the performances of Lamar Johnson and especially Sam, the young boy, Kevon Woodard. This kid's never acted before. This kid was like, they put a casting call out for someone who could do ASL, who was deaf, because they didn't want to just recruit an actor to play a deaf person, to make it like genuinely authentic. And this kid's never acted before, comes in, and if you listen to, again, every week we say go listen to the official Last of Us podcast with Troy Baker, Craig Mazin and Neil Druckmann, but they basically can go in depth about saying how quick they bonded, how good Lamar Johnson was as Henry to basically, he essentially learned elements of sign language over a weekend alongside Kevon. And just watching the two of them bounce off each other, immediately you could see that brotherly relationship and how much Henry cares about Sam in the show. And I think just them sitting down in that moment and saying, like, are you okay? Do I look scared? And they kind of do all the gestures and they word it out. And in the whole background, you've got the video game music playing. I don't know if you picked up on that, but the little Last of Us guitar, like the calm, gentle tune, that almost like the one that plays on the windowsill at the beginning. You've just got that, like, chilled out, like not romantic. What's the word I'm looking for? Like, he cares, essentially. It's showing empathy, and it's a nice subtle tone. And he gives, of course, the distraction if he lets them decorate the hideout, which we knew from last week with all the superhero drawings all over the attic. This place is going to look like an absolute collage by the time they leave. He gives them his crayons or his chalk or something, and they both just, like, get to town on colouring the bricks. And it's just, again, really touching moment. Again, we've both got brothers, Richie, and siblings and stuff, and it's just that thing where it makes you sit back and go, like, they clearly care about each other, which you would expect, and the doctor's just in the corner eating the cat food kind of thing.
Indeed.
In this particular part as well, what do you think the relationship is with the doctor? Because we don't really learn any more about it, but do you think he was the doctor who maybe looked after Sam while he was unwell?
It's possible. I mean, he's a doctor. We know he was a collaborator. Henry was a collaborator. I think you can just assume that they are connected through, like, Sam's illness. So you'd imagine if you're a doctor, like, Fedra would very much be interested in you.
Oh, it's got to be in short supply in a post-apocalyptic world. Especially old doctors. But especially old doctors as well, as you got to imagine X amount of them were killed, especially. A lot of the outbreaks will have happened in hospitals, so a lot of your top tier doctors probably got massacred on outbreak day.
I mean, it's implied that, like, Henry, he clearly knows Kathleen and her brother, and probably Perry, and a lot of the people, that resistance group, they've probably known each other for quite a while, probably since outbreak day. Like, they've been through stuff together, so it's kind of close, this kind of close-knit community almost.
Yeah.
So they probably know the Doctor as well. So it's not that much of a stretch that he's probably is Henry's Doctor.
Yeah.
Probably before the outbreak.
Yeah.
Like he was with Kathleen.
And again, I think he might just have a vested interest in helping Sam because of the situation, the events we learn later on when Henry explains to Joel about Sam not being very well, and that's the kind of crux of the whole fallout and why Henry basically throws Kathleen's brother to the wolves as such, because it's to get medicine for Sam, and I think the Doctor might have been instrumental in this.
Choice.
Yeah, he really does.
It's an impossible choice. Anyway, we'll talk about
we'll get to it, yeah, of course. So we cut to 10 days later. Food's running low. You notice Henry's watching the patrols out the top window, and you can see them breaking in. Essentially, it looks like they're getting closer. Like, you can see them raiding different rooms. And it does seem a little bit, I don't know whether it's restrictions of television, but the city still feels quite empty to me. Considering it was apparently full and populated, when they're going house to house trying to find someone, it obviously it is a post-apocalypse. We don't know how many people are left, but
I just kind of took that they're not in the QZ zone, so there wouldn't be people out this far really because of fear of infected, and Fedra seemingly took care of the infected. So
in this moment,
it could be a budgetary thing, but
yeah.
It could also just be it doesn't really make sense for people to be here. That's actually probably why Sam and Henry are here, because other people wouldn't be.
So in this moment, do you believe we're outside of the quarantine zone walls? We're just in the city.
Yes.
Right. Okay.
Yeah. It makes sense that they're trying to get out of the city. They wouldn't be in the QZ. I think it can probably be implied that where everything went down, that the way in my head canon, when the day happened when they took down Fedra, that's the day they probably got out in the midst of the chaos. Get out the QZ. Use the opportunity to just get out of there.
Yeah, because that was obviously a lot more condensed area.
That's just my headcanon.
Yeah, well, we saw the open gates last week. Remember, just before the ambush started, we saw Ellie go, "Is that the QZ?" And it was just wide open, no one there. So yeah, you'd imagine they've escaped and flooded into the city. But either way, yeah, food's running low. Sam's obviously concerned. He asks about the Doctor returning. I think he beats on the ground to get his brother's attention and signs. When is he coming back? And then Henry kind of has to make the decision that there's no food, and he essentially tells Sam, he's like, "Look, we're going to have to go." And he inquires about the Doctor, and he essentially says, "Yeah, they've probably killed him. He's probably dead." And they do this loving embrace. Obviously, Sam's very, very upset about this. He's a child who's just learned that someone they've been hanging out with or possibly known his entire life,
someone who
quite possibly is dead.
It clearly has helped them escape, helped them survive to this point.
Absolutely. And we see them embrace, and you can kind of see the camera pan across the room that they're in, that Sam's decorated. And Henry comes up with a great idea, very touching idea, as an older brother would. And he gets some paint. He tells him to close his eyes, and he paints the superhero mask across them with some orange paint. So Sam essentially embodies the heroes that he's scribbling all over the walls and drawing. It's a very touching moment. He's just told him some devastating news, essentially. It's trying to make, not light of the situation, but distract him from the truth that he's possibly just trying to come to terms with as a kid.
Strength. Now he can almost play the part of a superhero and feel more confident, stronger. Again, there's a lot of stuff like that bond of them as brothers is so important to this episode.
Yeah, it goes back to the overarching theme of the show, which is just like love conquers all, whether it's for better or for worse. It was like these clearly care about each other, and his brother's doing his absolute best to keep him kind of brave and pushing forward. So speaking of, they head out, and we think they're about to leave, and then we hear like a car skid, we hear a crash, and immediately my brain just goes it's clearly the events that unfolded with Joel and Ellie. You can almost visualize it in your head. He pops his head up to look out of the window. Nice little touch. I don't know if you noticed in the window as well, when Henry looks out, the reflection of the shop over the road, the kind of red banner of the shop signage, it's reflected back through the glass, and it almost gives Henry the red superhero imagery as well, the same as he just painted on his younger brother. So it's like a little thing that you'll only notice in like an Easter egg roundup show. I certainly didn't notice in the moment, but just doing the research for this episode, it was like, that's such a cool artistic thing you've shot through the window, and someone has went, let's sort this out so we can either get the angle right or we can CGI.
Let's take another shot, but can you move the camera to here? Because if we do that, we might get this.
Yeah, and just the mirroring of that is it's so subtle, but it just goes to show you how much attention these creative people pay to TV shows now. So they're both superheroes. They're both ready to make their exit. And over the road, crazy car shootout and crashes happen, and the events of last week's episode with Joel and Ellie's ambush unravel. And Richie, we have to say goodbye to Brian again. We say this is the moment Brian died. So 2 weeks in a row, I have to see poor Bri shouting for his mummy die yet again. And then we see Henry basically hatch a new plan from this point onwards.
Interestingly, actually, you see Joel kill the guy he killed off screen. One of the people you didn't see Joel kill, because there was two guys plus Brian.
Yeah.
Last week you saw him kill one of them, and Brian. Well, you didn't see him kill Brian. You get to see him take out the other this time.
Yeah,
from a different point of view. And
funnily enough, apparently Kathleen doesn't give a shit about the other guy because they only ever reference Brian, which is like, did the other one not matter? But we joke. So Henry hatches a new plan.
Come up with a name for them.
Maybe not. They hatch a new plan, and we essentially see Henry and Sam make their way towards the same high-rise building that Joel and Ellie were in last week. We see a cute little moment where they talk about the glass crunching on the ground, because of course Sam won't be able to hear that. He doesn't know that glass makes a noise on the sound. He gives him a weapon, he explains to him to hold the pistol up, and he messes it up straight away. And again, it's a nice throwback to Joel last episode, teaching Ellie about how to hold a weapon correctly, because Sam, again, you've imagined, has never held. He wasn't in QZ school, and we kind of see that moment, and then fast forward a little bit to Ellie shouting Joel, and they both wake up. And we know what's happened because we saw it at the end of last week. They've held him up, and this is where we get the interaction of both groups, both good guys, I would say, meeting up. Two good teams. Of course, in the video game, kind of a similar thing plays out as you climb through a window whilst you're fleeing the rebels in the quarantine zone, and kind of Joel and Henry have a little tussle. Ellie jumps out and basically realizes that because he's got a kid with her, he's not one of them, because they don't keep kids around, Richie. They don't keep kids around. Next up, we get a bit of interaction between Henry trying his hardest to be a tough guy. He can't quite do it. He's got a gun to Ellie's head, and I think he says something along the lines of, I don't really know what to do next. And he goes, I'm going to put the gun down, I'm going to trust you, okay? And Joel says, yeah, okay. And he's like, oh, why? That's a weird fucking tone, man.
Yeah, it's just like one of the best things ever. And it's just the way Ellie just kind of shouted, Joel, like, that's just how he sounds. He has an arsehole voice. Yeah,
he really does have an arsehole voice. And Pedro Pascal's face in this scene, like, it had me on edge. I know he's not going to hurt Sam or Henry, because he doesn't in the game, so why would they do that for the show? But like his side eye when he keeps looking at the gun in his face, looking back over to Henry, and you're like, he looks like a man who's preparing to just like grab a kid, hold him hostage, lunge at Henry and start a fight. Like he's in such a defensive breakdown survival mode right now. And Henry's like, that's a weird fucking tone, man. It's so good.
The words, like, he has an arsehole voice. It's like, Joel, tell him everything's okay. And Joel's like, everything's great.
Yeah.
You just see Bella Ramsey go,
dude. Yeah. That did make me really laugh. Nice little interaction there. Again, it's those little elevated bits of comedy, because it's not comedy, but you know what I mean. It adds an element of humor. We know the characters.
It's intended to be a bit comedic there.
Yeah. Absolutely, yeah. He asks if he can sit up, and they kind of have a discussion. Henry explains that he's the most wanted man in Kansas. And they kind of sit down, they share some snacks together. Bill's snacks, funny enough. Weird that Ellie says they're from Bill. He's dead, don't worry about it. It's just like, oh, what a way to introduce them. Like, then you must imagine Henry's thinking, did you kill Bill for these snacks? Or was Bill a good friend?
Kill Bill? Or did you kill Bill Volume 2?
Oh, there we go. Kill Bill. But yeah, of course they didn't. So he's the most wanted man. They share the snacks. Ellie introduces herself. She asks about Sam. How old is he? We learn, of course, that he's got his bit of sign language. Typical Joel doesn't even give his name, doesn't even offer his name up. Ellie has to nudge him and say, like, dude, like, we're communicating with some other people. Joel's basic outcome is, neither of us killed each other, let's just go our separate ways. Which is like typical Joel. He's like, he's not interested, he's not looking for more friends, he's not looking for help or support. He wants to do it all himself, get Ellie out and go find Tommy.
Yeah, this doesn't need to be a thing. We've had some food, we'll stay the night, then in the morning let's just part ways.
Absolutely.
It could just be that. It's quite interesting, like, in this whole situation, the one in control just seems to be Ellie. Like, everything is, like,
channeled through her.
It's kind of, it's channeled through her. Like, yeah, like, she is, although she's the one who's got a gun to her head, she's the one like is sorting Joel out. Like Henry's not sure what's going on, and like even like it's kind of Ellie who kind of disarms the situation basically.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, she confirms to Henry that he's just got an arsehole voice. She tells Joel, like, stop winding him up. She says, introduce yourself. And we learn later on that she's the one who suggests that they kind of hang out together long term. But obviously, they make the mind up. Next morning, we cut to them all looking over the city, and Henry's basically explaining what happened with Fedra, what his plan is. He echoes what we suspected, and he basically says Fedra raped, tortured, murdered for 20 years. So this quarantine zone was a shit show place. And even Joel says he'd heard bad things. So from being in another quarantine zone in Boston, he'd heard bad things about Kansas. So no wonder this group of rebels, Kathleen's group, were pushed to the limit of wanting to basically overthrow them, because it sounds like they were living in a hellhole.
Yeah. And it kind of just sets up like how violent the rebels are, because they've just for the last 20 years just basically been systematically abused by Fedra.
Mm-hmm.
So like when you see, going back to the opening scenes, when you see like them just straight up massacring people, it's like, yeah, there's this pent up anger for a long time for all the injustices they suffered. It's like, yeah, it kind of makes sense. It's not necessarily they're bad people. They're just they've suffered, like, and that's the thing. I think this show exists almost entirely in grey areas. There's no one who's distinctly bad. There's no one distinctly good. Everyone is just somewhere in that shade of grey.
Yeah, that
even
lovely
the worst characters. Yeah.
Lovely shade of grey, but yeah, you're completely right, and it does go a long way to be like, yeah, this place sounds like a hellhole for 20 years. And Henry then goes on, funnily enough, to explain to Joel that he's not actually killed anyone, and the reason he needs Joel is because he's seen him in action. He saw him take out Pua Bri, rest in peace, and he needs that. He needs that kind of conviction and strength to be able to murder people in cold blood and work his way through, because he knows that's not him. He's a little rat man. Yeah. He goes around sneaky.
The closest I've come to violence is pointing an unloaded gun at you.
Yeah. She's like, oh yeah, you've got a point. And again, just because it's a horrible world, it doesn't mean everyone's that way inclined. And again, just look at Kathleen. Like, she comes across as soft-spoken, but she's ruthless. On the flip side, Henry comes across as quite soft-spoken, and he turns out that he is, because he's protecting his brother. And we get a really sweet moment here where, of course, you can hear the kids chuckle in the background. It's the same as we get in the video game, and kind of Henry says, like, I've not heard them laugh like that in a long time, and kids should be allowed to be kids, but the world kind of prevents it happening a lot of the time.
This entire conversation reminded me of Joel and Bill's in episode 3, when you all sit down, like Frank and Tess go inside, and how Joel just like starts going off and going, right, I've noticed this, like, so we're clear. All the stuff that I can see your insecurities. Henry kind of does something similar to Joel here. Like, he disarms Joel's like, well, I don't have any, basically, I point an unloaded gun, so the assumption there is you don't have any bullets, otherwise why would the gun be unloaded?
Yeah, I'm no threat to you.
This is why I'm not a threat to you, but this is also why I need you. Because you have a gun and you have bullets, I need someone to help to shoot things.
Yeah.
And then letting the kids play it together. Like, he can tell Joel. He assumes that Joel's Ellie's dad, so he's playing into that. Like, and
again, it goes back to like parents. Like, if you see someone out there in the wild who's got a child with them, I think you would just like naturally, just instinctively, just feel less fear towards them, because they've got a child with them. So they have to be parental, they have to be caring, they have to be empathetic. So it's not just like a random stranger you've bumped into in this crazy world that we live in. It's someone who's caring and looking after someone of a similar age.
I can help you protect this child.
And vice versa, yeah, it completely is. And Henry knows that through and through. He lays out the plan on the table, he sketches it with a pencil, because you've got to imagine all the pens have dried out and gone. I've never really thought of that till now, but yeah, pens must be done.
Pencil. You need to get a sharpener.
Sharpener's gone. Like, I don't know, like pencil, like they're not infinite. And I guess that's where we get to the little sketch pad that Sam's got. It's just a reusable kind of like an Etch-a-Sketch. It's just a piece of material. I don't even know what it's even called. We don't even use them in our lives. We have digital stuff, but yeah, it is just like kind of almost like a slate sheet with like a little almost like semi-translucent sheet.
Flipping up.
Yeah, I bought my cousin's children some for Christmas, but they're digital now, so it's similar to an Etch-a-Sketch. You get a little stylus pen, you scribble on it, and then you just press a button and it just resets it. And they came in bright pink and blue, and they have animal colours and stuff. And I remember as a kid loving an Etch-a-Sketch and just scribbling something, and then the ones with the dials? Or were they the Etch-a-Sketch? What am I thinking of?
They were Etch-a-Sketch.
What was the one? The ones where you just pull, you slide, you do the slider across, and it's just the same thing essentially. It wipes it clean.
I know what you mean. I can't remember.
Everyone's had them as kids. But kids nowadays just have damn iPhones and such. But we digress. They show off the plan, and on his little writing pad, he lets Sam get involved, and he just writes tunnels in capital letters. And the plan is to use the maintenance tunnels underground. Joel's very clear. Kansas doesn't have a subway, and Henry explains that these were maintenance tunnels. And the reason Kansas City doesn't have any infected is because the one good thing Fedra did during the 20 years of rape, murder, and torture was to clear everything out and drive the infected underground about 15 years ago. And from his informant, Henry's under the impression that the tunnels themselves were cleared out about 3 years ago. However, we do get that moment when Joel goes, "Have you been down there?" And he goes, well, no, actually, I haven't. I've just been told by someone, a friend of a friend of a friend told me that. Yeah. And you can see in Joel's head, he's like, fuck's sakes, man, you've got no hard evidence to suggest you're not taking us into a viper's nest of infected.
What you've just told me, from Joel's point of view, is Fedra pushed all the infected underground and then have claimed to clear it out, and you're suggesting we go down there, where all the infected are.
But Kathleen's men aren't.
Yes,
that's the only positive, apparently, in this whole plan.
Positive because open streets versus narrow tunnels?
Yeah, but then that goes back to the question of what's a bigger risk in this world. Is it clickers and infected, or is it humans? They can follow you, they can hunt you, they can shoot you from a distance, they can be relentless, whereas the clickers, if you hide somewhere and just stay quiet, is that easier, I guess, maybe?
I don't know. I think in this situation, I'd rather take my chance with the open streets, because I would think, the way I'd be thinking is in the open streets, there's directions, we can go down different routes, we can potentially lose any pursuers.
Mm-hmm.
Open tunnels against a relentless horde of clickers screaming and charging at us, you've got a single direction to move.
Yeah, I did think...
So you just need to outpace them, which is probably not going to happen.
With two kids, yeah, and 56-year-old legs.
Dodgy knees. Yeah.
Absolutely. But anyway, they take out their plan, they make their way to the tunnels, they work their way in through the maintenance areas to, which I was delighted to see, Richie, a nice little kind of hidden bunker, a hideout deep in the maintenance tunnels, covered in paintings, drawings, a little castle, some children, some balloons, trees, countryside. Of course, Sam is absolutely enamored with this entrance. Joel kind of holds him back and says, no, we don't go in there. Went in, no bottle trap. I was expecting the bottle trap from the game, which kind of sets off the whole, we're in a different area. We essentially enter into some kind of school. We see learning equipment, toys, paintings again, a football goal, soccer goal. And we realise, we're in a safe place. And what I absolutely loved is I think Joel actually sees the drawing of Danny and Ish, who are our protectors, which are two people in blue holding guns, scribbled in crayon. And that's an absolute direct reference to this whole area. So in the game, it's not really explained that much in the show, but we understand that there's some people called Danny and Ish who are the protectors of essentially these kids who must be down here. In the video game, this is a whole element of environmental storytelling. You find some notes outside of a pair of sewers after escaping the city, and it explains to you that there's a gentleman called Ish who went out to live on a boat during the outbreak. He decided he got fed up of eating fish at sea, and he came back inland. He found this sewer network. He decided to set up camp in this big secure area with access to clean water, air circulation, not air conditioning. What a luxury. And essentially, he then went out into the little town we find, the suburbs later on, and met a bunch of people with children. And again, children make everything innocent. He welcomed them back to his little home, and they essentially built a community underground. But in the video game, you only learn that through letters and storytelling and scribbles on the wall and notes. And it's a great setup for a spin-off episode. If ever there was going to be a spin-off episode, we had Bill and Frank for 70, 80 minutes. Give me 70, 80 minutes of Ish and Danny looking after these kids and their essentially downfall. It's not a happy ending. Sorry, spoilers, but And it was a nice little homage, I thought, just to see it exist in this world. And they kind of use it as a safe haven for Ellie, Joel, Henry, and Sam to kind of just take a bit of respite, chill out, and let the kids be themselves for a little while. Any thoughts on this video game movement coming across? Would you wanted to see a little bit more of maybe? Would you like to meet Ish? Or is it for you, it's something that just they were never going to have time to fit it in?
I don't think it's important enough to do any more than what they did. It's a nice nod to people to play the games. Again, in the games, it was environmental storytelling. It wasn't necessarily that important to the narrative of the games.
Mm-hmm.
It's nice that they've got it in there. They've got it in there quite a natural way. I think it gives Ellie and Sam a bit of more bonding time, which I think is needed.
Mm-hmm.
You can't just have them constantly going. They need to be kids together. It gives like Henry and Joel a bit more time. So I think it's like for the show, they needed this place to actually just let the characters breathe a bit and interact.
Yeah, it's a bit of levity without the risk of being attacked constantly.
And just there's in the games, there just happens to be this very nice thing that they could just work into that environment quite naturally. Well, we've got this thing. We need this thing in the show to make these develop these characters together.
Mm-hmm.
Let's just do it. But I don't think going into depth with Danny and Ish and who they are and what happened to them would add much, to be honest.
I can see it from both sides. I could see it being its complete own standalone thing, but like I said, 9 episodes, a lot to get through.
If they were going to commit to going, you know what we're going to do? We're going to do some like one-off in between like this season and season 2. We're just going to do some one-off like episodes. Like it's going to be an hour. You're just going to get an hour, like a short story of Danny and Ish centered in this area.
Yeah,
absolutely do it. I think that'd be cool.
Like, there's loads of stuff, and in the like official, in the official podcast, they do say like they had it all planned out, and Craig, the director, was saying like he wanted to include them, but they didn't include them in the game, and they didn't include them in the show. But again, it's there if it's a nod if you want to. Jem in the chat says, they should add a QR code hidden in an episode, and when you scan it, you get a unique cosmetic for your show in the game. That's crossover thinking right there, Jem. But yeah, and they're back to essentially what Jem also says is the Fallout Vault, where they're in this safe haven that's self-sufficient. Of course, in the video game, you see how they get fresh water, how they get their daylight and their oxygen into the sewers, because even in the real world, I guess maintenance sewers and stuff, they have some kind of self-sufficient thing that keeps them aerated and livable. Otherwise, there'd be loads of dead people in our sewers, Richie. There would be.
You need to get air into there, and this is probably an area that was probably a mess room or something at one point for the workers.
Yeah, completely. And these places exist all over the world, and I guess we never know because we don't see them. Moving on though, we settle in on Sam and Ellie, and they kind of share their love over a comic book, which again, very prevalent in the video game series, the Savage Starlight comic series. They're actually one of the collectibles in the game. You collect them as Joel for Ellie. There's a trophy at the end of it for getting them all. But in this one, we learn that Sam has issues number whatever, Ellie has issues number whatever, and they basically bond over the love for it. And we get this really good touching moment where Ellie essentially recites the key catchphrase from the comic book series, which is "to the edge of the universe, endure and survive," where the episode gets its title from. And we get a really touching moment where kind of Sam words along with what she's reading on the comic book, and it basically shows Ellie how to sign endure and survive, which I think it was like thumb down together and then you come up, right? That's got to be a thing, which I thought was really cool, that we as an audience get to see what endure and survive means, but then like you said, it's that moment for them too as kids to just learn a little bit more about each other. And they both, like, the restrictions of entertainment in this world, what are the chances they both love the Savage Starlight comics?
They bond over the same thing
immediately. They play football. Joel and Henry have a little chat. Henry basically explains to Joel, like, adult talk, why he betrayed Kathleen's brother, and this is where we learn what our suspicions were last week, Richie, that it was going to be an impossible choice. And he essentially says Sam had leukemia, which again, it's just like, man, this world, they just keep the directors sit down and go, how can we make something worse? It's like, give the poor kid leukemia as well.
I kind of like this touch, because not only does it serve as like Henry's motivations, just because there's an outbreak of cordyceps doesn't mean, like COVID, just because COVID happened doesn't mean other illnesses magically go away. They're there as well.
Yeah. Absolutely. So, that's the harsh reality of the world, isn't it? It just keeps kicking you while you're down. And we learn that, Henry, to get the drugs needed to look after Sam, he needed to trade with Fedra, and Fedra wanted something big. And evidently that something big was handing over, I'm guessing, like the location or whereabouts of Kathleen's brother, Michael, I think he's called.
Yeah, who is seemingly the head of the resistance group. I think it's kind of implied at this point, like the resistance group existed but wasn't doing anything. You know, like how the Fireflies were in like episode 1, where it's just almost just like graffiti.
Yeah,
that's basically all they really achieved. A few skirmishes, but mainly just graffiti, and they're just not getting anywhere.
Yeah, this is essentially to give you the triangle of it. This is like Han Solo handing Luke over to Darth Vader, and Luke gets just killed immediately, and Leia's like, that was my brother. He was our linchpin of our Jedi resistance here, and Han Solo just hands him over to save Chewbacca, who's got leukemia. just to paint a totally different world there. Yeah, I'm thinking of Savage Starlight now. My head's off in space. Endure and survive, folks. May the force be with you. But anyway, he explains about throwing him under the bus, and he says like Joel was a parent once, and Henry explains, like you said earlier on, Joel figures Henry out and Henry figures Joel out. In this regard, the way he acts and behaves around Ellie, he calls him out and basically says like, you might not be her dad, but you were a parent once, and straight away sees straight through Joel's facade, and calls him out on it. Joel immediately, let's go. There's a moment
when like Henry kind of first time he refers to like Joel, like Ellie as Joel's daughter, like they're both simultaneously trying to say, I'm not a dad.
Oh yeah, they like shout it out, like don't they? Like, so like, he's not my dad. I'm not her dad.
It's just like simultaneously. It's like,
it's great.
Maybe not be yet, but you're on the road.
You're on the right road. Yeah. We cut away from this group, and we find ourselves in a random bedroom in a flat somewhere. Kathleen's in there just kind of observing the area, looking sad, and Perry comes in and explains that they haven't found Henry, Sam, Joel or Ellie, and Brian's still dead, R.I.P. She explains to Perry that essentially this was a childhood bedroom that she shared with her brother Michael, who was, of course, leader of their resistance party, and he was a lovely man. He was a forgiving man. He protected her. He taught her that she's safe as long as she's in these four walls from thunder, lightning. Nothing can get to them. He just paints a picture of, I guess, growing up in the quarantine zone. There must have been a lot of shit that went on outside that they saw, and her brother was just trying to create this little safe space for his presumably younger sister to feel safe and have that little small pocket of the world when nothing was going to get her. And she's sat in there and obviously reminiscing, and she talks about the last time she saw Michael in a cell, and he essentially told her to forgive Henry, like for whatever he's done, like let him go. So clearly Michael was the forgiving type of person.
Yeah,
beloved leader.
It's interesting that she saw him in the cell where in last week she claimed her brother got beaten to death in.
Yeah.
So she saw him behind bars. Probably was the last time she saw her, and then probably he might have even witnessed or even heard, like, just knowing that Fedra just beat him to death. But Michael seems like this guy. He seems like a compassionate guy. He's probably set up this resistance because he knows how, like, basically Fedra in Kansas City seem to be straight up evil. Mm-hmm. We've seen Fedra abuse power, but this seems to be excessive even for Fedra. Yeah. But he's kind of while he has his heart's in the right place, he's kind of a crappy leader. He's not achieving anything. Kathleen seems to be the opposite side of that coin, where she's not a good person, seemingly, but she very much can get things done.
Yeah, it seems like Michael maybe kept her in check, and without him there, she's just totally embraced like her crazy elements. And she kind of summarizes that point about him being forgiving, and she's just like, "Where's the justice in that being forgiving? What is?" She actually says, "What is the point in that? Like, it doesn't get you anywhere." Yeah. And that's when Perry steps in and says, "Look, your brother was a great man, but he didn't change anything. You did, and we're with you." And it's that to reaffirm that Perry's he's there to follow her to the very end. Like, he's just like...
He respects her because he's probably been following Michael before this out of this kind of sense of, I believe in your vision. Mm-hmm. But he's following Kathleen because he knows, like, you got us here. Like...
Yep. Absolutely.
So, I'm willing to indulge this hatred you have for Henry, because that's what got us over the line, probably. It's probably Michael's death that kind of probably woke her up and just actually went, I'm taking charge, we're going to do this, we're going to roll the dice, and we're going to take them down. Or probably, I can imagine being like, again, I'd love to actually see that happen. The whole thing, you meet Michael, start the resistance, see, like, maybe not straight up witness his death, but up to his death, and see the change in Kathleen, probably, and going, like, her taking over, and just being willing to just go, you know what, I don't care. If we all die trying, we all die trying. Let's just roll the dice, because if we don't, good people like Michael will continue to die. Absolutely.
Yeah, it was a very short scene, but it did kind of give us another layer to all their relationships and where they got to. Because this could have been just a flashback. This could have been a flashback to seeing it unravel, and they went with a more calmer approach. You think?
I think it was needed.
Yeah, it split up a little bit.
It was needed to kind of justify Kathleen's character a bit, because like I was a bit mixed last week. I've come full circle going, you know what, actually she is a good character. It does fit her purpose in this show. She does have a purpose in the show. It's not just
she's the bad guy for being bad guy's sake.
Yeah, it's not just a bad guy. Yeah, that's it. You can see what she's done, why she's done it, and now I understand her involvement.
Absolutely, yeah. Upon second watch of this episode, it really kind of does cement the nuances in her performance a little bit. Yeah. The way she's calm and collected, but she's also kind of crazy and evil inside.
She's not. I don't think she's necessarily crazy and evil. I think that's not who she is. She is naturally probably a kind, compassionate person who put aside that kindness, that compassion, and found success. Yeah. So she's leaning into that.
Yeah,
that is what's been successful for her.
Yeah,
and she's rejecting what Michael kind of stood for.
Yeah, like his way didn't work, so let's try something different.
My way did. Yeah. So let's continue down that path, which is probably why she's so fixated on Henry, because that's what the path I walked to get us to this point. Let's just keep walking it.
Absolutely. We then head back over to the group, Joel and Ellie and them, and seemingly they've escaped the city. Just like that, Richie. They got through that whole area of the video game, which is killing loads, running away from loads, that damn truck, and they find themselves in the suburbs, which, in the video game is a nice exploratory area. There's no clickers or anything about, and you just get to go through loads of houses, watch the kids play darts together. Sam and Henry, in fact, tells Joel about like remembering the barbecues when he was a young kid before the outbreak, and he wants to ride a motorcycle. We get all this kind of like touching little tribute bits. I think Ellie and Sam talk about an ice cream machine, and his two kids, they just have no clue what the concept of an ice cream van, in fact, could be.
Probably never had ice cream.
But yeah, exactly. Let alone it be delivered in a truck by a creepy middle-aged man with a what's the song the ice cream man says?
Cigarettes.
What's it called? Green Sleeves by Henry VIII, of all things, plays on UK ice cream vans. Yes, it does. But yeah, either way, we get to the suburbs and we get a very recognisable kind of area from the game. Loads of white painted houses, shrubbery, trees and stuff, funneling down an avenue towards some kind of bigger manor houses on the end of it. And from there, everything seems okay. Henry's kind of excited. He's hopping around saying his plan worked. It's all good. And Joel's just like, do you all talk so much? He's just like, let's get through. He's already back to angry Joel. The plan worked, but he doesn't want to accept it yet. And then we hear, gunshot rings out. It's the sniper, Richie. It's the sniper from the game, right at the far house at the end. He's got his full lay of the land ahead of him to just take pot shots at you. And in the video game, this is quite hard element to get around, to navigate to the sniper. It plays out very similar, but we see them kind of all hide behind a car. Interesting enough, Henry tries to make off with Sam immediately. Joel says stay there, and he immediately responds his flight. He tries to run away.
He
panics, which of course in the video game he does run away, and he actually betrays Joel and Ellie to some degree. But it's very, very interesting. In the chat we've got a few questions. Jem says, I might be wrong, but is this the first episode that mentioned the word clicker? Yeah, I think Henry actually says, like, you've seen... I think Ellie refers to them as those things that hear like bats again. And he says, you've seen clickers already? Like, you've survived two clickers?
2 of them, yeah.
Which is impressive, but we're about to see...
That's kind of back when they're still in, like, the high-rise, and, like, it kind of, like, Henry's like, well, I've clearly got the right people if you're going to survive clickers.
Yeah, you know all about it.
You take out some of Kathleen's, like, some of the hunters, and now you're telling me you've fought and succeeded against clickers as well. It's like, yeah, I've got the right guy here.
That's why he's right. And hopefully he does have the right guy, because, yeah, this sniper's just taking pot shots at them. They're there in the dark, and Joel, already using his expertise, comes to the conclusion that it's, when he tries to go away, he says to Ellie, it's dark and he's got shitty aim, because I think he's took about 8 shots at them already and he's not hit anything.
Yeah.
So that leads to it. And he again, really good relationship point with Ellie here, where she doesn't want him to run away. She says, you'll get shot. And he addresses her, looks her straight in the eye and just says, do you trust me? This is the first real time I think Joel's reached out to Ellie that hasn't been like chaotic and in the moment panic, and just he's directly looked at her and said, look, do you trust me?
Yeah. It's not, I need you to trust me. It's, do you? It's because that requires a confirmation. It's like, it's not, I need you to trust me. Like, you should trust me. I know what I'm doing, or anything like that. It's not him kind of like grandstanding in that kind of way. It's just going, do you trust me? It's like, yeah, it's like, right, I'm going to do it.
Yeah. So Joel works his way around the back. He sneaks up into the house, and it turns out, Richie, our sniper is just an old man. He's just an old man who sat there, called Anthony the old man, taking pot shots in the dark at these 4 people running down the street towards them. He's clearly some kind of like outpost on the perimeter to maybe call out any infected he sees or any attackers, or he's got there with a radio. Joel sees him, and immediately we learn a bit more about Joel's character. Like, he might be a killer, he might be a very competent killer, but he doesn't want to be one. And he sees the old guy and he's like, look, let it go, let us pass. Give it an hour.
Just wait an hour.
And all will be fine.
It's not even don't call it in. It's just give me an hour.
Yeah, just don't react, don't do anything. And you can almost see the old guy's like, I'm going to try it. And Joel's like, please don't do it. I don't want to have to kill you, old man.
Pedro Pascal on the scene is like, just please don't.
Yeah, he doesn't want to murder an old man.
It's one of them. It's like, you know what's about to happen. It's like, come on, old guy. You know what's going. You're not winning this situation. Like, don't do it.
Yeah, absolutely. And you can kind of tell in this moment, the bit for me is I feel like this old man must have seen some shit, and they cover it in the official podcast, but he's just ready for it to end. Like, he knows he's going to get killed here, and I think of all the shit he's probably seen for the last 20 years, he's like, now I'm a sniper on lookout, and I'm tired. Like, kind of back to Bill and Frank, just going, I'm tired, I'm old.
It might be almost, I have a chance for a clean death here.
Yeah, just kill me. I can't commit suicide. The coward's way out, kind of thing. Just all I have to do is turn in this chair and aim a sniper at you, and you're gonna shoot me. So yeah. You hear the gunshot ring out in the streets, and Anthony the sniper is dead. But then we hear the radio. It's Kathleen on the radio saying, "Hold them there, Anthony. We're on our way. We're not too far away." Joel shouts out the window, "Run!" And you see the truck. Not the same truck, but Naughty Dog have a great thing in the games where they have an evil truck. They do it in Uncharted, they do it in The Last of Us, where you're hunted down by this invincible machine.
It does this thing as well. It cuts back to Ellie for when Joel kills Anthony.
Get a reaction.
And when I was it's every single time we see Joel be violent, it's when Ellie's witnesses it. Otherwise, you don't see it.
Yeah.
There's not a single time in the show we've seen Joel do anything violent that Ellie hasn't witnessed.
Mm-hmm. It's really,
I think it's one of them things. It's very much setting it up, I think, through Ellie's point of view, the show in its entirety. It's not Joel and Ellie's point of view, it's through Ellie's point of view.
Yeah.
Which actually, for me, I think is maybe a bit of a nod to the second game, but you know, people were kind of pissed that in the second game, you're not playing as Joel anymore, or you might be playing as Ellie. I'm not going to go into spoilers and what happens, but I always felt like Ellie is the true protagonist of The Last of Us, not Joel.
Mm-hmm.
Even though in the game you were playing as Joel, the story always revolves around Ellie.
Yeah. Yeah,
but,
it's a really good, it's a really good take.
That kind of a nod to that.
It could be, and I think as the episodes like play out longer, I'd be intrigued to know how it shifts, because even in the TV show, I think Joel or Pedro Pascal is very much centered as the main person, and I think you get that because obviously he's a more famous actor as well. He's a bigger name, so naturally you're more gravitating towards him being the lead. and especially because nearly everyone who's a side character seemingly around him dies, it kind of keeps him as your main lead. But yeah, in the video games, they can do something different. But at this moment in time, you're right, yeah, they say run, they all panic and flee. Ellie trying to shoot at the truck, which we know from Uncharted, you don't shoot at the truck's invincible. You can't do anything with those little pistol bullets. But clearly, again, demonstrating that she has no clue what she's doing. She's just running in fear, shooting back aimlessly. Joel's taking his pot shots at the truck with his sniper rifle. Again, amazing part of the video game. This is when the enemies are kind of flooding on towards the three innocent ones, and you as Joel have to take them out with a sniper. It's the only real part of the game where you're in a locked, fixed position, and you see it all unfold through the scope of the sniper rifle. Yeah. This time around, though, we see the truck smashing through all the cars in pursuit of Ellie, and Joel finally, just before she's about to get ran down, takes out the driver. Truck smashes off the road into a nearby building, explodes into fire, and just kind of lodges itself in I guess somebody's living room. And like the whole scene's kind of lit up now with fire as Kathleen's group approaches. It's raining as well, if I'm not mistaken. It's just chucking it down with rain. I think it's rain and fire, like a mixture. That's what in my mind. That's how I've painted it anyway. It's dark, so it's hard to see. It's set at night as opposed to day in the video game. We see Henry, Ellie, and Sam take shelter behind a car, and Henry essentially
saves Ellie.
He does. He grabs her and kind of pulls her away.
On the floor in the middle of the street, he runs out, grabs her, and pulls her. He could have left her.
He could. Again, showing that he's out there to look after both his brother and evidently Ellie by proxy now. Henry and Kathleen.
It could be the fact that he knows Joel's got a sniper rifle.
That too, yeah, you're quite covered on that front. But he's willing, Henry's willing to kind of give himself up for the kids. And as they're sat behind the car, he shouts over and says, "Oh, they're just kids, let them go." And this is when we really start to see kind of Kathleen's calmness show, like some really deep, worrying things about her. She replies to Henry saying, "No, sorry. The girl is with Brian's murderer and Sam is with you." So just the sheer fact that Sam is with Henry, he doesn't get to live. Well, not necessarily live, but he doesn't get to go, which we suspect means she's just going to kill him anyway. And Brian's murderer, again, poor Brian, Joel's up in there, and Perry dispatches like 4 men, I think, to sneak around the back and get Joel. So his time's numbered as well on the sniper lookout. She says, "I know why you did it." So clearly Kathleen's aware of why he made the decision for Sam. But then she just goes on this conversation about saying, maybe he was just supposed to die. And then what does Sam say? He's just a fucking kid or something. He's like, let them go, they're just kids. And she just cold as anything. Kids die, Henry. They die all the time. This is what happens when you fuck with fate. And it's just like some of the best lines you could ever ask for on a show as like an antagonist. Is just, talk about making you
believable. Like, if you think about what she's grew up in, she's probably seen hundreds of kids get killed either by Fedra or by infected or just by not getting the treatment. So it's like, why is he any special?
Yeah.
Michael, my brother, was special. What's he done? It's like, why you effectively traded my brother's life for your brother.
And he'd do it all again, no doubt. Again, it goes back to love, isn't it? You love the people in your own inner circles, and that those relationships are like, everyone would probably do it. Family, it's like what? Family first, then friends, then colleagues. It would just kind of go on until it's like the random stranger you don't know. They go first because you don't know them.
Like Henry, like he has an impossible choice. The man he admires or his brother.
I don't think it's impossible. I just think it's unfortunate for the person you're not closer to.
Well, that's it. It's not.
It sucks. It really does.
It really is. But it's like he has. The reason I call it an impossible choice is because there's no someone good will suffer from this decision, and you have to basically pick. It's like I don't want either of these people to suffer.
Yeah.
But I have to pick one of them. And Henry, he's a good guy. Like. Even though he beats himself up about it, but that actually just shows you that he is a good guy, that he does have remorse of the situation. He wouldn't change his decision, but he does feel guilt about it.
Yeah, absolutely. And maybe that gets to him here because Henry he accepts his fate and he gives himself up. So again, to protect Sam and by proxy Ellie, he stands up and says, "Look, there's no way I was getting out of this." Holds his hands in his air, stands up for me on the car. Takes a step forward in front of them all, again all loaded with guns, and Kathleen's there, fire burning in the background. She gets a gun out. She's like, "Oh, this is kind of the end." Goes to shoot him, Richie. What happens? Yeah. What happens?
The truck falls into a hole.
Yeah, the truck, which was crashed into the side of that building, caught fire, exploded. It starts to creak and move, and everyone in the group immediately, of course, pivots, glances over, what's happening?
What's that?
What's that? And we hear this kind of like rumbling roar from in the fiery sinkhole, and it's that distinctive noise of infected. And just like that, the whole damn thing explodes with an outpour of clickers, runners, and my word, Richie, we've seen these creatures in action in prior episodes, but they were so fucking fast in this one. Like these were like World War Z zombie levels of like threat. They were pouring out of there like ants out of a nest. It was insane.
Well, they're called runners for a reason. We saw in episode 1 on Outbreak Day, like the runner that chases Joel through the diner and just like has no control, just slamming into walls.
Relentless.
They have no it's relentless. But it's like this entire action scene is phenomenal. It's not full of like 1,000,000 cuts of like shaky cam. But so you actually get to see what's going on. There's a lot of cuts. It is changing perspective a lot. But you know when sometimes you watch an action movie and it's just like 1,000,000 cuts, just shaky cam, and it's like you lose all sort of.
You get lost in the motion, don't you?
Yeah, it's disorientating. You don't have that here.
Really, really clever editing, and I think in the official podcast they do a massive shout out to Weta Workshop, so the guys who were famous for doing Lord of the Rings initially, based in New Zealand, and they're the CGI design team they use for this show. And Craig Mazin's big fan of Lord of the Rings. Shout out to Craig. And he points out to when they come pouring out the hole, it reminded of the reason he wanted to do it was he remembers in the Mines of Moria and the Fellowship of the Ring when the goblins come out of the ceiling and they kind of pour out
like
all
a wave.
Yeah, they come flooding out of there because there's so many of them, and you kind of see this here. The rebels open fire and it's chaos. You've got fire going off in one place, people spreading out. There's clickers everywhere. There's gunshots. Everyone's running around screaming.
Some of the runners as they come out are catching fire because of the explosion that happened, and they're just running on fire. So not only are the runners chasing you down, they're on fire. It's like that must be absolutely fucking terrifying.
Yeah, and the bullets seemingly don't do much to stop
even
these
for, like,
things.
Seasoned veteran like these hunters are, like, you must see like, oh, we're fucked.
I'd just run. Like, if I was at the back of that like lineup of rebels, I'd be like, yeah, I'm just gonna step away here into the shadows and hide until this passes by. But
this whole thing, we're fucked. Let's just go.
Yeah, and you can kind of see that in a lot of people's faces. We see Henry, Sam, and Ellie kind of take cover. Joel provides some cover fire immediately, just like the video game when the kind of infected start to pour down into the avenue. Joel, as a sniper, he's trying to cover Ellie. He's taking some shots, and then Richie, we get a deep roar. We get kind of like a Balrog in the deep, and we see a bloater, which we knew was going to happen from the trailer. We weren't introduced to it earlier in the show, which you do see the bloaters a lot earlier in the video game, and we see it.
It's in Billstown in the high school. You have your battle of the bloater.
And obviously in a video game, it's very easy to just kind of crank up the enemy violence and size and strength. Kind of, that's like classic video game 101. Bigger enemy as you level up. But in the show, obviously, they've kept this distinctly until now to give us this big reveal. And we see this absolute behemoth. I think the stunt guy they used for the prosthetics was like 6'6". So you can imagine like the size of this person in real life. And yeah, comes out the hole, deep roar. You can see the fear in kind of Perry's face when they lock eyes with this monstrosity.
This is new.
Probably none of them have. Which is like, if you think about it in the city, to get to blow to stage, this is the next level of infected after the clicker. So realistically, you've been infected as a runner, your mind's gone crazy, you're frantically running all over. Then the infection takes place when the horse is starting to run out of kind of resources, and the fungus cracks through their skull and takes over their vision and everything, and essentially takes over fully. And then once they get to a point where all the resources in the body are used up, they usually find like a nice quiet place to just bed in. We saw one with Tess actually in episode 2 where they bed in and essentially the fungus just grows and takes over and consumes every element of their body. And in some cases, the bloaters are described by the director and Neil Druckmann as these are people who are already bulky to begin with. So they've got lots of like juicy fat on them, Richie. There's lots of nibbly bits for the fungus to eat away at and thrive and live off, and to a point where they just last longer than your traditional people. So you end up with these hulking beasts of a monster. Introducing the bloater, ladies and gentlemen.
And the bloaters are brutal. Like, he just straight up picks up one guy and just slams him into the ground one-handed. It's like...
It's like sending a child into a silverback gorilla's compound. He would just mess. He would just like ragdoll that kid about all over the place. Very much, which is what happens next, quite frankly, because we see the bloater clearly makes a beeline for Perry. He empties his entire kind of cartridge of ammo into the bloater. Doesn't do anything. He tells Kathleen, run, go, don't look back, and he's just willing.
Don't look back.
Yeah,
just run. And
he's ready to sacrifice himself, and he doesn't really do anything of any merit. No. R.I.P. Perry.
He empties his clip in his AR, goes for his pistol, and by the time he gets his hand on his pistol, the bloater's got him.
Doesn't have time. And for anyone who's played the video games, Perry's death in this is very much ripped, literally ripped straight from the video game. It's bloater's hand on the bottom half of your mouth, other hand on the top half of your mouth, and he just splits your skull in two. And they do that really clever thing they've done throughout the show already, where they drop focus a little bit. So we don't see it in all its gory detail, but we know.
Now, you focus on Kathleen running and you see this happening in the background and go, oh, Perry's fucked.
It is absolutely brutal. But yeah, shout out to Jeffrey Pierce, of course. Voiced Tommy in the game, R.I.P. But Perry, what a way to go. You've got to imagine as an actor who's done the game as well, once you read the script and find out like that's how you're going out, you must be like, oh, that's cool as fuck. Like, obviously harrowing for the character in the real world context, but yeah, brilliant in terms of the game. Ellie hides in the car. She's running away. Sam and Henry crawl under another passing vehicle, and Ellie kind of makes her way through this little window. Joel's covering her frantically, firing shots, taking out heads and everything. It's a really, again, cinematically really well shot. You kind of understand the tension between them. Every time Ellie looks up to the window, you can almost see their communication just by their gestures towards each other. Like, she knows what she's doing, he knows what he's doing.
Then looks to where she wants to go. Joel's like, okay, I know where you're moving.
I've got it. Move out. Like, go. I've got you covered. Yeah. They get into the car, and then Richie, if we thought the bloater was the stuff of nightmares, Joel, you can see the panic in his face, and you can hear his shots aren't quite ringing true, and they're pinging off the car. You can hear them ricocheting off metal, and in the background where Ellie's in the car, we see a clicker crawl through the window. But it's not just any clicker. It's a clicker we've never seen before in the video games. It's some kind of gymnastic contortionist Chucky looking motherfucking child clicker crawls through, and this is horrible.
What I like about this is it's not a new type of infected. It is just a clicker. It's just someone who's just more flexible. It's a young child. She's more flexible. I assume she could be a guy.
It is, yeah. It's a young contortionist called Sky, I believe I've seen on Twitter. Just a young girl who does contortionist stuff and acting. And the Neil and Craig said the videos, the kind of the videos that they were submitted for audition were creepy. Said you can imagine she was on her back crawling around like spider-like, and all the stuff you see in all those horror movies, like The Thing and everything.
They do it though.
No,
in the show.
No, it was creepy enough already where they're just kind of fumbling over the back seats of the car all backwards, and Ellie's like, oh shit, she does her very best Jeff Goldblum from Lost World with the Velociraptor, when as soon as the raptor gets in the car, he just opens the door and gets out the other side because they can't like really process getting in and out of these vehicles. Ellie escapes. She kind of runs away from the clicker. She goes over and helps Sam and Henry, stabs him in the back with her switchblade. Joel takes one out, headshot, blows up, clicker dead. Sam and Henry get out, and they basically are like, right, we've got to run, we've got to get away. But just before they escape, Richie, Kathleen's there. She couldn't let it go.
Fixated on Henry.
She couldn't let it go. She locks eyes with him. She's got a pistol drawn, and we're like, if she just like Perry said, run, just run and take cover, save yourself. But nope, I'm guessing in all the chaos, she clocks Henry somewhere, and she's like, right, this is my chance. He's not getting away. He is my priority. Pulls the gun on him, and who do we see off in the distance? We hear a little click, click, click. Camera pans across, and it's the damn Chucky clicker kid again, stood on the top of a podium, leaps on her neck, on her face, drags it to the ground, and
you know what? Head deaf, straight up from like the video games deaths, because we haven't really saw like the clickers beating on you like you do when you die in the game.
Yeah,
like, you think of like zombies and zombie things, oh, it's going to all be bites and stuff. Like, the clickers just straight up like pound you to death. It's not like her chest cavity will probably just be caved in. She'd be choking on her own blood. It's a horrible death.
Yeah, she just gets mashed by essentially a child. Which, back to what she was saying earlier on, Rich, you remember? Kids die all the time. And I feel like there's definitely a prophecy that she declared when she said, yeah, tough shit, Henry, kids die all the time. Yep, and kids who turn into clickers who have died also come back and beat your face off. And that is the end of Kathleen. She ends there as we pan up over the neighbourhood and we see fire, chaos, clickers, bloaters, infected everywhere. Gunshots ringing out still, and this is the last we see of Kansas as we move away from the quarantine zone. Next day, we catch up with our group, I should say, in a motel. Adults are joking, talking about, like, I guess probably like just glad the day's over, quite frankly. Exhausted, sat there. They have a little chuckle to each other about Endure and Survive from the comic books that the kids are discussing. They have a little adult joke about that shit's not great. It's Endure and Survive's a daft line because they've seen it. They know as adults what they've just lived through, and Endure and Survive must just seem so funny to like just categorize it as
like Endure and Survive's like
barely. Just get through the damn day. Yeah. So that's funny. And this is where Joel officially invites Henry and Sam along for the trip to Wyoming. He's like, look, we've been through so much these last 2-3 days. Like, yeah, I'll probably be walking, but you're welcome to join me. And Henry's like, fuck yeah, like, we're down for that. That sounds like a plan. Like, the kids get along, we get along.
Point, he has seen Henry potentially sacrifice himself for Ellie. He's like, okay, I can work with this guy.
Absolutely.
He's an old softy, Joel.
He is. He's got a hard out shell, but he's soft on the inside. We cut across...
Arsehole voice.
Arsehole voice, indeed. The kids are in the room. Henry goes in and says, right, time for bed. You've had a busy day. And the kids are faring surprisingly well, all things considered, but kids bounce back from things that they don't quite understand. I'm sure they'll have nightmares tonight, but that aside, they're looking at the comics, they're talking, and... Sam takes a moment to say, like, look, I'm not interested in the comics anymore, and he gets his little scribble pad out and he writes, are you ever scared? And then he replies, like, do I look... Like, this is all written down, by the way. Do I look scared? Shows on the writing pad. Never. I'm scared all the time. Of scorpions. Rightly so. Scorpions is a good thing to be scared, but she's just trying to be lighten the mood a little bit from the questions Sam's asking as a young child.
She's going for a rough time as well, but it's like... She's probably trying to lighten the mood just for her own sake as well, like...
Yeah, and again, it's the communication element, because in the video game, Sam and Ellie are a similar age, whereas they've specifically de-aged Sam in this one, I think, to give him that extra sense of innocence, where Ellie is the senior character in all of this.
It makes Ellie more like a big sister rather than just a friend.
Yeah, absolutely. He asks, she actually then admits after she realises that he's not joking, he's asking a serious question. She jots her answer down as, I'm scared of ending up alone. Which rings true, quite sadly, and like in the real world and in a post-apocalyptic world, it's like, oh shit, that's a horrible thing to not want to happen.
I think that is a very important line for Ellie to say at this point, because for what happens in the game when they get to the dam, like it's such an important scene that's coming, probably next week, to understand Ellie's fears a bit more, because on the surface she doesn't ever look scared, but she is. Yeah,
she's still a kid. She's still a kid. Even as an adult, you'd be scared. But yeah, then she corrects her answer. She says, "Yeah, I'm scared of ending up being alone." Asks Sam, "What about you?" And he does his little restarts and shuts down. He doesn't answer a question, he just asks another question. If you turn into a monster, is it still you inside? And then he rolls up his.
What he's scared of now, isn't it?
Oh, 100%, absolutely. And then I think as an audience we go, oh fuck, no. He rolls up his leg and he reveals that he got bit at some point through all the chaos earlier on in the evening. He got bit on the leg, and everyone, yeah. I mean, in the video game, it's when Joel's on the sniper and they're being attacked. You don't think that you see it, but if you go back and play the game, you actually see the moment when Sam and Henry get attacked by clickers and you fight them off and Ellie fights them off. He does get bit at that point. You can see his body language and stuff change in the game, but it's one of those things retrospectively when you go back, it's like, oh, you actually see the moment it happens. But in the show, we don't really get a moment where, as an audience, we would maybe even think anything as bad has happened. But here we are later on, the reveal, he's been bit on the leg.
we're having this moment of levity. It's like, think, okay, our heroes have got out of the
end of the episode, nearly, yeah.
And then you get this like bombshell. It's like,
yeah, it really is. Ellie, it's an interesting one with Ellie in this moment because she shows her bite mark off to Sam, and she's like, "Oh look, I've been bitten," and she goes on to say that like blood is medicine. She cuts her own hand right through the palm. Why does everyone do that through the palm? It seems like a really bad place to have a wound. Yeah, just on the outside of your arm or something. Just avoid the veins.
Every time you open your hand or close it, it's going to open the wound.
Yeah, it's like a paper cut between your fingers. Like those things suck.
You want to go like on the forearm or something.
Yeah, you'd think so. But either way, she's just a kid with a knife. She cuts her hand up and she says like blood's medicine, and she rubs it into Sam's wound and she puts his trouser leg down and says like, "Oh, it'll be okay." Sam jots down his notepad, "Stay awake with me." Ellie replies saying, "I promise." And they hug. My word, Richie.
Damn.
It's like, I actually thought this was better done than the game. I thought at this point, like in the game, they have a little bit of a conversation about like, do you think there's something inside? And she says goodnight and she goes off to bed. But in this one, I think
it's
again,
stay awake with me. Like Sam doesn't, he doesn't truly believe that he's cured. He knows what's going to happen. He doesn't want to go through it alone. It's like he knows it's going to happen. It's going to happen very quick. It's like.
Absolutely. And I guess I kind of would have asked to you, on your take on this, do you genuinely think Ellie thinks her blood's medicine? Because she knows she's immune and she is a kid, and like, is she naive enough to maybe think by just rubbing her blood on it that might help? Because remember, they don't have science classes, and she's only 13, 14. Like, is in your mind, if you're like, shit?
I think she's looking at the situation and is going, I've got to try something. Either this is going to provide him some comfort in his last hours, or this might work. This might be an off chance for it to actually work. But I think it's more about providing like the comfort to him. Is like, I think it sets up a bit of their motivation going towards the second half of the series. A bit more like, at the moment she's just been kind of just going along for the ride, but like it's in the second half of the game where she gets a bit more proactive about trying to get to the Fireflies.
Yeah, she knows.
I think it sets up a bit more as like she's just seeing this kid. I mean, we know
a friend,
now, like a friend. She's just lost another friend to this thing. A thing that she's been bitten twice at least.
Yeah,
and it's fine. So there's got to be something about her that could potentially benefit other people.
Absolutely.
I think this is one of the things where it is replanting that seed in your mind as an audience. Like, but I think for me it is mainly about, I just hope this works. But if it doesn't, at least it might be a bit of comfort. Yeah,
absolutely. And we don't know what happened with Riley yet, her friend from the beginning. I think that might actually be not next week, the week after. But Nick in the chat says, she's trying to comfort him, save him a little bit of pain in his last few hours, which, again, is a big sister. Just anything to kind of distract from the inevitable, what's going to happen. But then the only thing that concerns me with that kind of thought process is she doesn't then make any effort to tell the adults or get out the room. So if she doesn't believe rubbing her blood and it's going to work, wouldn't you want to get the hell out of there? Because you know what's going to happen.
It's like,
so like she must be convicted to this plan.
Hope, but if she tells Eve the adults, what happens?
Yeah, it's weird, kids. Because
if she tells Joel, Joel's going to want to kill him. So Henry's probably going to want to kill Joel, and the whole thing turns into a bloodbath. If she tells Henry will probably panic.
Yeah.
It's probably naivety why she doesn't, but I think it's probably the right decision to not.
Yeah,
like,
it's also
there's no good situation, and this is probably the least worst situation. And there's probably that hope in there that it might help.
There's also that element of like kids, when kids get confused or scared or they're in trouble, like they don't always do what they should do. Like they know they should go tell an adult. They know they should stop doing something, but because at the end of the day they are kids and something really, really scary just happened, they just kind of just keep it from the adults because they don't want it to maybe escalate or get in more trouble. Like, let's face it, if Sam was bit, if I was a daft kid who maybe like cut my leg or thingy my knee, I might not want to tell my mum and dad in case I got in trouble for being daft and getting hurt in the first place. So it's an interesting dynamic that we'll never really know. Jem in the chat says, at first I thought Ellie was trying to be nice and give Sam comfort, but then I think Ellie genuinely thinks she can heal because of the way she willingly slept through it. Yeah, she was willing to stay awake with him as they promised.
Yeah, I don't think she's willing to fall asleep. I think we saw in the last episode, she's like, I'm not even tired, when in the car immediately cuts to asleep.
Yeah.
She just fell asleep.
Yeah, I think when she fell asleep upright in the chair, she intended to stay awake, and like we all do with the best intentions, when we're like, I'm going to stay up tonight, you fall asleep.
It might have just been a case of she's going to sit there on this information, observe the situation, and if he looks like he's turning, then tell Joel.
Yeah. There is a point.
He doesn't need to say anything yet, and probably ideally, maybe tell Joel when Henry's asleep.
Yeah,
because she knows what Joel will do.
Yeah, and then she falls asleep anyway. But Nick in the chat again says, elements of feeling safer because Ellie can get infected. So I guess similar back to what Tess said about you can still be ripped apart though. But I guess Sam is such an innocent young boy who's probably not offering much of a threat at all. Yeah, she does think. But either way, sleep becomes them. And she's caught out in the next morning. She wakes up. Sam sat on the corner of the bed, seemingly looking out the window, and she says, "Oh, hey." And no response. She goes over to see Sam. She puts her hand on his shoulder, I think, and then he just absolutely turns on her, bursts through the room. We see violence, screaming, fear, clicker noises, or not clicker noises, runner noises, I guess, infected noises. And you see Joel panic, wake up. The Henry's scrambling. He grabs the gun immediately to protect Sam, presumably. Doesn't really know. No one really knows what's going on. Like, I'm not the best when I wake up first thing on the morning, Richie, anyway, let alone when I guess my son bursts through the door and he's attacking the young girl we were with, and there's another man who's got up and raw. It's absolute chaos. Absolute chaos. But in the moment, I think Henry, in fact, comes to the conclusion that his brother's attacking Ellie. He needs to protect this young girl. He knows in his heart of heart what's happening. He just doesn't want to do it. And
his instincts take over.
Absolutely. Bang. Pulls the trigger. Sam drops to the floor. Blood pours out. Ellie watches the whole thing, and it's just kind of like, oh shit. Joel goes into his usual, like, Ellie, are you okay? Just checking on Ellie to make sure she's fine. Not really acknowledging Sam, which I guess you would default to your own child immediately in those kind of situations. And he goes to approach Ellie, and this is where Henry turns the gun on Joel. And Joel's immediately like, okay, calm down. And I think, like you said, that it was instincts for Henry to shoot Sam because of what was happening. Yeah. But I think after he has that fraction of a second to kind of take in what he's just done, he turns the gun to Joel and he's asking, like, what did I do? What did I do? What did I just do? What did I do? And you can see every time he says, what did I do? The panic is building up in his voice, the worry, the being scared. And you're like, he's coming to the reality of he's just killed his brother. He has done it. And that must be a weight that I don't think any human being could process or bear. In the 20 seconds it's all happened, you've gone from being asleep to seeing it unroll, accepting your brother's infected, he's trying to kill a young girl. You've shot him, he's now dead, and like, what is there left in your life now? Like, that's just harrowing, in fact.
Yeah, finish like what happens in the scene. Like,
yeah, so after that, I guess leaving it on that cliffhanger. I was waiting for you to jump in there, but then, there's something quite big.
But I think it makes more sense for what to say.
And then break it down. Then Sam just, again, I guess Henry. Why do I get them mixed up all the time? Damn brothers. But Henry then decides, like, he's made the decision, all within, again, 30 seconds, that this is on him, it's his fault, there's no one to look after, he's lost his brother, and just turns the trigger on himself. We cut to Ellie. I'm glad we didn't see this part, because that would have been too much immediate violence. We hear the gunshot. Ellie lets out like I don't even know what the noise would be, but she's absolutely like shocked with what she's just seen. Yeah. And within seconds, she's lost Sam, she's lost Henry, and you cut to outside, they're burying the two bodies.
Guy shoot himself in the head.
Suicide, straight up, just dead.
The thing, like, I knew what was going to happen in the scene. 100%.
It's the game.
But damn, this whole thing, it's less than a minute. From Ellie waking up to Henry killing himself, it's less than a minute. It's just so, there's no kind of like build up to anything. It's just bang, punches you in the face. Like, whoa. Like, imagine not knowing what was about to happen. Like, how shocking. This is like Game of Thrones, like
Yeah, there's people watching this show who've not played the games who go into this episode and say, I really like Sam, I really like Henry, their relationship's awesome, I love how they've met Joel and Ellie, and they're trying to open up to each other, they're going on this adventure, they're off to Wyoming, the kids are getting along, the parents are getting along. Oh, what a great adventure this show is going to be. And like you said, just like Game of Thrones, it pivots on a dime, and all of a sudden we're like, oh shit, kids dead, adults dead, we're back to Joel and Ellie, this world is horrid.
It doesn't give you time throughout the scene to process what's happening. It just hits you with it. Yeah.
It plays out. Again, very, very similar to the video game. One of the things I guess I want to touch on, besides all the horrible things that have to happen, it was brought up on, I think, the official podcast. I think Troy Baker asked about it. But when Ellie wakes up and she sees Sam sat on the edge of the bed, and the night before he went to sleep, he asked, when you turn into a monster, is it still you inside?
Yeah.
When he's infected and he's on the edge of the bed, obviously he must have just fell asleep or turned at that stage. When Ellie wakes up and she's sat in the chair and she calls to him, she says, hey, and he doesn't respond because he was deaf. So when he's infected, and he obviously immediately, when he sees Ellie, he turns on her, he attacks her. In that moment, do you think that's still Sam? Because he can't, obviously, you don't magically get your hearing ability back just because you're infected, but is it him still locked in there? And this is the kind of ongoing thing with the cordyceps. Like, it's taking over your brain, but like with Tess, it's like, is it still the monster inside? Is it still him?
At what point do you lose that consciousness?
Mm-hmm.
There will become a point where you die, but there'll probably be a point before that where you have turned.
Yeah,
that's kind of what I think it's like, kind of implying is like, at what point does that transition happen?
Yeah, and what makes it, I guess, more grounded and scary and real is it seems mad to think like, oh yeah, as soon as he turns, he's just gone and he's got no control over his body. But I was reading something about saying like, is it any different to when as human beings now, if you take drugs or you get really drunk, you want to tell your body one thing, like walk that direction, walk in a straight line, don't fall over the stairs when you get home. But because you're drunk and you're intoxicated,
you're still in there.
You're still in there. You're still you. Anymore. Exactly. So imagine how horrible Sam's last moments might have been, where he doesn't want to attack Ellie, he doesn't want to do anything, but his body is like, everything's convicting him to just jump on her and go for her throat kind of thing. And like, oh, it's horrible. It's horrible. And then he's dead. So we cut to outside. They're burying the two bodies, which I don't think Joel in the real world would have probably left to bury bodies. I think he's too pragmatic and he would have just said, we're wasting time, we're too close to danger, let's move out. But I think for Ellie's sake, he lets them bury the bodies, even though Ellie seems quite closed off immediately to all the violence and the loss, similar to Joel in a weird way. They bury the two bodies, and again, just another hit, Richie. Just before we cut to credits, let's just get one more emotional beat that's gut-wrenching for you in there. Ellie places Sam's writing pad on the top of the grave with just the words, I'm sorry. And it's like, fuck me.
She's also took off the thing so it can't be erased as well.
But what a way to end. We see them walk off to continue their journey. The music plays, we cut to credits, but damn. R.I.P. Sam and Henry.
Again, I think in this show, Joel burying them is important because we're seeing Joel get softer and softer. Like as this going on, we're seeing him become a dad again, like letting himself open. So like he's now met people he didn't know. He probably liked Henry.
Yeah, absolutely. There's something there.
And now it's like he invited him to come with him. So it's like, okay, Joel's starting to see this guy as a potential friend, as a potential future partner. Like maybe he sees him almost like hey, how isn't really like almost a replacement for Tess, someone he can count on, someone he can work with. I mean, Tess was more to that than Joel, but
I know what you mean. Like, yeah. You again, along the way, you get friends and stuff as well, and especially in this world, like they're probably hard to come by. So to find someone who he's genuinely sees as Henry just cares for his brother, clearly not a bad guy. He's had altruistic reasons for doing what he's done. And to kind of reach this end where, he sees him kill his brother, he sees him kill himself, all within, again, this is like the next morning after he just agreed to like join them on their journey. And here we are, we're back down Back
Joel
down, yeah.
actually invited him. It wasn't like Henry didn't ask.
Mm-hmm.
It was Joel who reached out in that moment.
Yeah. And just like that, we're back down to our original two. Joel and Ellie continue pushing on towards Wyoming.
On the road again.
But that's the end of episode 5. It goes to the credits. And Richie, as with every episode here on the ClickerCast, we round out by looking ahead to next week and some of the performances that we get. So have you checked out this week's teaser for episode 6? Wonderful. In the teaser trailer, again, you sometimes see it at the end of the episode, sometimes not. It looks like we are going to bypass Tommy's hydro dam from the game and cut straight to meeting up with him in Jacksonville, where there's evidently a community already. Tommy's a part of that community. And we kind of get loads of cut shots between being surrounded by horses. There's lots of snow. So seemingly we are skipping ahead to a new season. We look like, it definitely seems like we're going to see Tommy and Joel kind of meet up back in Jacksonville. It looks very reminiscent of the beginning of the second game, actually. So I don't know what they're doing with the time and the way this community is developing and coming along, because we don't see it in the first game. We hear about it, but we spend a lot of the time at the dam instead. A couple of newer characters introduced, but it doesn't give much away.
No.
Any
There's
predictions?
A lot of, shots. I think, again, what I mentioned in the dam, there's a conversation between Joel and Ellie.
Mm-hmm.
That's going to happen.
Yep.
This is why I think it's so important. I don't want to give spoilers for too many spoilers. I know we are spoiler free, but it's like it is a pivotal moment in their relationship where they are at that crossroads in the relationship, and the decision they make in that moment leads them a certain direction. Yeah,
absolutely. It's interesting though.
I think that's what's going to be.
The look ahead shows us lots of Tommy and seemingly David and his gang. Won't tell you who David is yet, but the university happens. It kind of looks like they're going to mix it all together in some way.
Yeah, well, I've got a feeling that they're going to mix the university and the Fireflies together.
It's all just kind of one
thing. You've got the university, and it's just another place where the Fireflies aren't. Effectively.
Yeah.
But I think what you might see is the Fireflies will be there.
Something happens. But again, because Joel, something needs to happen.
It condenses the story, but you're not actually taking out any story, really. You're just taking out a movement.
Well, we've got 4 weeks left, or 4 episodes, I should say, left. And as we know, episode 6 is going to feel a little bit later because of the early episode we got this week. As always on the show, we round it up to performance of the week. So chat, help us out here. Who was your best performance of the week? And Richie, I'll throw it over to you to take point. What was your best performance of the week? I know what you're going to do already, but go for it.
There's two. There's 2 people I think need a shout out massively. And I feel sorry for Pedro Pascal because he's been consistently excellent, but the nature of the character doesn't give him that as much of a range of emotions as some of the other characters. So for me, it's between Bella Ramsey and Lamar Johnson.
Interesting.
Again, Bella Ramsey was phenomenal again in this episode. The range of emotions, but I'm leaning towards Lamar Johnson as his portrayal of Henry because it's a complete performance, and he just goes, he goes from like the unconfident potential killer at the start, to trying to warm up to Joel and a bit naive, going into the tunnels to basically being a bit of a hero during the battle in the suburbs to everything he experiences in that last scenes. So for me, it's Lamar, but Bella Ramsey again, absolutely. I think she is just generally one of the best actors out there at the moment. Full stop. Not even for her age, just her performance this episode was that good. What about you?
So this could be a bit of a split week. We've got Jin in the chat saying Kathleen was his standout performance of the week. So
she was again. She was great.
Ellie Linsky, delivering it, of course. And she did die, so that usually gives kudos points to our performance of the week. Jem says best performance from the joke book, always making people laugh. Yeah, jokes aside, Henry for Jem is his main go-to this week, so similar to you, Richie. Nick in the chat says Sam, and I'm kind of torn between the two. And I was thinking, Richie, we were leaning more towards giving the double, similar to we did with Bill and Frank in a way, because I think the combination of Sam and and Henry is like that brother duo. And again, taking on board that Kevon Woodward, not an actor prior to this, like the performance he put out for someone who's never acted in his life. And when they started shooting, this young boy was 8 years old. At 8-year-old, I was picking my nose, sitting in the playground, not knowing what was going on in the world. And this kid's just delivered an emotional performance, again, through sign language.
Yeah.
All the emotion in that relationship.
I think you're right. I wonder if I've unfairly slightly dismissed Sam because it was through sign language. I don't understand sign language. But I think you are right. I think it has to be Sam and Henry.
It's just one of those things when I think of like,
because they don't work without each other.
Yeah, like we were saying earlier on when I was describing Henry's performance and how he comforts Sam and shows him. But equally, on the other side of that conversation is Sam signing and showing emotion, showing the innocence of a young child lost in a world, and he's confused and he's scared. And this is all through an 8-year-old boy who's never acted before. I think just absolutely crushes it. And like you said, he's got a huge. Show you, like,
how great the casting and the performances have been. Where we've thrown out 4 or 5 names in the hat here.
Yeah,
and we haven't even talked about Jeffrey Pierce's beard.
Jeffrey Pierce's beard, yeah, could take the whole thing. And again, I know we don't give it to like the whole like infected team's fantastic at what they do, but yeah, just through sheer performance, I think. Jeez, but yeah, the casting, the direction, obviously, they must do multiple takes and stuff, but I think for me anyway, personally, for this young boy to come on board and do that, I'd either say like a Sam and Henry combo, because like you said, they work as a duo, and they both did die this week, so going back to our hardened rule here on the ClickerCast that we've got a double award this week, 2 die, 2 for 2, brother and brother, and really, really, really showcase something amazing. I think that young boy, and to be fair, both of them have fantastic careers ahead of them, because I don't think Lamar's that old anyway. So we happy on that one?
Yeah.
Sweet. I'll throw it over to you then as well for your moment of the week, specifically.
Why do the moments have to be so fucking shitty? But
I know. So where do we land?
Look, I mean, you can talk about the bloater and the battle and all the action stuff, but it's the motel.
The end.
Yeah.
Intense.
That scene from basically when Ellie wakes up to like Henry shooting himself.
I'd completely agree.
It's just intense, and there's so much emotion on show in that. That very again.
2 minutes, 3 minutes,
it's about 2 minutes long, and it just hits you so hard.
Yeah, it's the wave of like the come down after like they've just survived. The kids are getting emotional. Sam has been bit. Ellie's trying to protect him. And then they go to sleep. Everything's okay, maybe. And then it's like, no. Escalate, bang, bang, bang. And it's just, what a whirlwind.
Watching it for the first time is like, you're almost expecting a cliffhanger. Like, Ellie falls asleep, roll credits. But no, it just does it.
And then you have to remember to breathe as well. At the end of it, you have to go like, oh shit. And again, I played the game several times. I knew what the outcome was, and the performances and the way this show is set up, it's like it just goes to show like a testament to everyone involved that like it's like I knew exactly what was going to happen and pretty much almost beat for beat how it was going to play out, and yet they tweaked it enough, they changed it enough, they performed it so well. Yeah, it had me again on the brink of tears with this one. And then obviously the actual shock at the end, I was like next to my wife, I was like, I need to fucking breathe, because I'm just like, wow. Television.
Can we go for a walk somewhere sunny, somewhere safe?
No infected. Yeah, Sjem again, chat agreeing. Yeah, agreed. The last scene, absolutely. Hungry Moogle as well. Yeah, good evening. And then final one, Richie, the best video game adaptation of the week. Chat, what do you think? What was the best like-for-like video game moment we got? Because there was some good ones this week.
I mean, I could go for the same scene again, effectively, but
you could.
I don't think I want to go for this. I like to go for more gamey scenes, gamey moments where like, well, that was just phenomenal acting, but it's not really. I know it is in the game, but it's a cutscene rather than
yeah. The
sniper stuff is definitely pretty up there.
Yeah, I was waiting for someone.
Like, the combination between Ellie, you mentioned as we were talking through it, the combination between Joel and Ellie during the sniper scene. That did feel a bit gamey.
Yeah, I was waiting for someone to try and open the hatch and throw a Molotov out, and Joel take them out, and that's how the car set on fire. And they showed a bit of restraint from that element of the game instead, because the truck wasn't invincible. What do you think about the introduction to kind of Ish's little hideout with the drawings all over the wall and being in the sewers? I thought that was very that just looked exactly like the set from the video game.
Oh god, it was basically identical. I thought that was fantastic. But as we said, I think that they didn't need to dwell on that.
Mm-hmm.
I'm glad they used it. I really like the way they did. So if you're watching this and have never played The Last of Us, it's just a cool set and a little bit of world building. But if you've played The Last of Us and you've read all the notes and stuff and you understand who Ish and was it Daniel?
Danny, yeah.
Danny, yeah, you know more about that, so I think it can land on several levels, but they didn't overdo it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so I think that's good.
So what are you leaning on then? What's your go-to?
I think for me it is the sniper scene because again it feels more of a video gamey scene rather than what is effectively would have been a cut scene or just a bit of exploration. Yeah,
I'd agree with you in the chat as well. Yeah, the sniper scene's such a big pivotal part of the game. You've just gone through loads, and the sniper's an arsehole to take out. He sends loads of guys at you, and I think that whole street, that was a full set they built for the show as well. Craig and Neil talk about it on the official podcast of they built it because they knew they wanted loads of extras, they wanted explosions, they wanted a fire crew, there was gunshots and pyrotechnics running out all over the place, CGI en masse and everything else. And I think it's just such a good moment, and they laid it out perfectly. House at the end, sniper, the full street, in what a scene it made for. It really just set it. And as someone who's played the games, it just felt like I was in the game in that moment. Like, they tweaked it a lot, but the location made it feel like, yes, this is a big part of the game. It's going to be the finale of this episode, and they delivered on the action. I would agree. Yeah. So let's see, Sniper. We'll call it Sniper Street. Sniper Street. That brings us, though, Richie, to an end of this week's episode of the ClickerCast. Of course, join us next Tuesday, 8 p.m. GMT, usual time, after the episode is aired. Regular viewing times of The Last of Us. What's next week's episode called? Because the trailer calls it Kin.
I don't know off the top of my head.
Which I guess he's going to reunite with Tommy, so I guess it might be Kin. That's what it's called. This one was called Endure and Survive. But thank you for everyone who's joined us in the chat. We do appreciate you stopping by, especially this Sunday evening when we've tweaked our scheduling around a little bit. Don't forget to check out the rest of the amazing content we do here on the channel, Talking the PS, every Tuesday, round up all that PlayStation news, including The Last of Us stories. Every Monday, we round up...
Get it now.
They can actually, yeah, you're right. It's available now to our Helix Heroes. X-Pass is available on Monday. That goes up live tomorrow. Podcast feeds, YouTube, etc. And of course, join us every Thursday, sometimes Friday, for a live stream with you, the wonderful folks. And if you're out there this weekend playing Harry Potter because you don't like death, suicide, murder, and monsters, check me out in the wizarding world of Harry Potter as I wave my wand around and cast some spells, Richie. But that brings us to an end of episode 5. Don't forget, folks, run along to the comments. Stalker us on social media at Helix Plays Games. Clicker that notification bell and blow to yourself on all of our other content. But above all else, endure and survive. We'll see you next week. My name's been Chris.
And I've been Richie.
Goodbye.
Mm-hmm.